the season is over,
Mm-hmm.
and so now we can officially revisit college football's first ever de facto trade, which was Nico Iamaleava. That's the last time I'm going to pronounce his name correctly. He doesn't deserve that anymore. Nico Iamaleava and Joey Aguilar traded between UCLA and Tennessee. And brother, the proof, as I like to say on this podcast, the proof is in the pudding. Talk us through the pudding.
Could you imagine if we could have added Tim Banks to that trade? We'd probably be talking about our playoff game right now if we could have got Tim Banks with that Nico trade. I mean, it wasn't close, dude. It was absolutely not close. I've been harping all offseason that I think Tennessee fans need to stop using this as an excuse for this record that we had this year, the 8-4 record, which, by the way, was a whole lot better than the 3-9 record at UCLA, Blake, by the way, which is what they finished at. So, yeah, man,
With
at
an
the end of the
easier
day,
schedule, by the way.
oh, way easier schedule. So here's the deal. It just nothing is comparable. Nothing's comparable. Even if because if a lot of UCLA fans and Tennessee fans, maybe Tennessee fans for some reason that still defend Nico, which there are very few, but they exist for some reason. They'll say, well, look at Nico in the situation. The situation wasn't there, which is funny. That's ironic when that's said, Blake, because let's remember one last time. Let's revisit it, Blake. What was the revisionist history when Nico wanted to transfer from Tennessee? It was the situation wasn't good enough. The situation wasn't good enough around him, Blake. It was the receivers. It was the offensive line. Poor me. I just don't have enough around me. Even though Dylan Sampson and our defense dragged you to the playoffs in 24. That was and by the way, Blake, the three receivers this year who were top 10 in SEC receiving yards were on that 24 team, by the way. They were on that same team. Like those receivers, Mike Matthews, Chris Brazel, and Braylon Staley were all on that 24 team. But it was the situation, Blake. That's why he left. Let's just pretend that's the case. Okay. So he goes to UCLA. He goes 3-9 with that situation. Okay. Well, maybe he was good, but the team wasn't. Maybe that was it. No. A lot of the reason they were losing is because of Nico under center, Blake. That's the reason. I have some stats, some PFF stuff if we want to get into that, Blake. Just comparing Joey Aguilar and Nico, because I think it paints a picture that, hey, Aguilar might not have been perfect this year. The Tennessee Vols didn't make the playoffs. But without question, in my estimation, Blake, Joey Aguilar made this Tennessee offense significantly better compared to Nico in 24.
Absolutely. And again, the numbers are there. We're going to talk about Austin. There's some numbers. I really want to talk about some nuanced numbers, including drop percentages that you're going to get into. But again, folks, jump in the chat. We've had a couple people. They're few and far between. A couple people who have said that they've clung to this idea that we would have been better underneath with Nico, that he would have progressed or something. Look, yes, ultimately we're never going to know what would have happened with Nico because we didn't experience it. We had Joey Aguilar. They had Nico at UCLA. But Austin, the numbers are there. The intangibles are there. And it's like, I don't quite understand how. And look, let's be honest. You and I are pretty level-headed Vols fans. If Joey Aguilar had been a huge issue, and by the way, we did criticize Joey Aguilar when he made mistakes.
Yes.
He made the critical mistake against Alabama, probably the game.
It wasn't perfect, Blake. It wasn't perfect.
It wasn't perfect, and we criticized him when he made mistakes. But we would have, if Joey Aguilar had just made us vastly worse, we would have said, "Hey, man, like this is
we got it wrong.
This is It's a throwaway year. It's a throwaway year." But that's not what happened.
That's not what happened at all.
We were celebrating because he elevated the offense.
Correct. We were top 10 in every relevant category on offense this year in the entire country. The offense was better. And listen, if you want to say Aguilar started having turnover issues towards the end of the year, maybe even the middle of the year with the Alabama game, the Oklahoma game. I hear you. It wasn't perfect, but his bad games were way better than Nico's bad games last year, Blake. And I gotta disagree with Dylan in the chat. Dylan's a great chatter, but I just don't think year two of Nico would have been better, man. I just don't think it would have been because there's no evidence of that. There's no evidence of that. I think if we're just saying from a very honest viewpoint, Blake, because we are trying to be level-headed, I think the running ability would have been better. Nico's a great athlete. Fantastic athlete. But look at what he did at UCLA. He chose the situation at UCLA, man. And he said the reason he left, that's what his camp said. That's not what really happened. But he said the reason he left Tennessee is because the situation around him at Tennessee and the Josh Heupel offense wasn't developing him to become the best player he can possibly be. Nico got much worse this year, man, at UCLA. He got much worse, and I just don't think he didn't show enough last year for me to say. I mean, the last thing we saw of him last year in a Tennessee uniform was him versus Ohio State, Blake. Him looking like a complete and utter bum against Ohio
Yep.
State. I mean, it was just overall, it was extremely inconsistent year one with Nico, and overall, I would say average at the very best, maybe even below average. And then this year two in college football for him, or year two as a starter in college football, I should say, he got worse, man. He took UCLA to a 3-9 record, dude. And again, to remind people that have forgotten, because I think a lot of people are just they have the Aguilar, the last thing he did on their minds, Blake, and they're forgetting just how bad UCLA was this year. People,
Yeah.
New Mexico, right? A team that UCLA played this year, Blake, hadn't had a Power 5 win since 2008, the beginning of the recession. Barack Obama term 1, Blake, was the last time New Mexico had a Power 5 win, and UCLA's and Nico's UCLA Bruins gave that to them this year, Blake. That's what they gave them. Their first Power 5 win since 2008. That's how bad they were. And did they get a bump with the new OC against Penn State? For sure. They had a 3-game winning streak in there, which Nico, by the way, really only played well in one of those games, which was the Penn State game. And that was by far his best game last year or this year. And then after that 3-game winning streak, Blake, they ended the year losing every single game, a lot of which were complete and utter blowouts, dude. I can't fathom. I just don't think we have any evidence saying that Nico would have been better this year. I don't think we do. I think everything points to the opposite. I think Joey overall made their offense because we just got done talking about Tim Banks and Jim Knowles and how the defense is going to get better, blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, let's not forget, people. Look at what Nico had on defense last year, which he has nothing to do with. Right? In fact, he put his defense in worse situations, I would argue, Blake, because we were going 3 and out a lot last year. Okay. 0 points in the first half in 3 straight, in the first half in 3 straight games, 0 points. That's not putting your defense in a good spot. His defense was better. And then Joey Aguilar was working with one of the worst defenses in the entire college football, man. Could you imagine if the Fireman had last year's defense this year?
Exactly. And and to clarify, we certainly don't think we would have been better with Nico this year than we were with Joey. In fact, we think we certainly would have been worse with Nico than with Joey. But to Dylan's point, and Dylan's making some valid points, right? In terms of, would Nico have been better than year one Nico? So not comparing Nico to Aguilar, but this year, but would year two Nico have been better than year one Nico? And he makes some valid points about, not putting a ton of stock in UCLA because UCLA was going through coaches. And he makes a great point that, Hendon Hooker vastly improved under Heupel in year two. Very true. But here's where I push back, Austin. The issue with Nico was intangible stuff. I think Hendon Hooker had the ability to learn the system and get better. And Nico is certainly athletic. And naturally, you're going to, with consistency, you are going to I mean, practice makes perfect, right? Eventually, you're going to get a little bit better with consistency. But the issue, I think, Austin, with Nico, I think it's very clear that what we saw was it was an intangible thing that wouldn't have or couldn't have improved. He wasn't a good leader. His
Yeah.
teammates didn't appreciate his leadership. He wasn't outspoken enough. He couldn't get through his progressions, Austin. He just
Yeah,
he
exactly.
and someone was saying in the chat, I don't remember who it was, decision making. He wasn't making quick decisions. And that's not something that all of a sudden you're better, like you just improve
No.
your personality changes or whatever. It's these intangible things that I think we're very clear that Nico is just not as he's athletic. He got his 5 stars because he's tall and he's fast,
Mhm.
but is he a good quarterback?
He's not.
It's just clear to me that he wasn't going to. Now, would he have maybe marginally improved? Maybe, right, in year two, maybe. But I think it is overwhelmingly clear that we would have had a sputtering offense once again, Austin.
I think so, man. I think so, and I'm honestly surprised to see that so many people think we would have been better this year with Nico under center. I don't think you watched enough UCLA, man. It was the same problems you brought up. You brought up intangibles, which is a great point. I mean, people bringing up how he didn't want to be a Vol and he was a bad leader. Those are all very true and things that we need to take into account when we're having this discussion. But another thing is the thing you brought up, which is how about getting through progressions? How about pressure to sack rate? Things of this nature, which
Yes, get
again,
into some stats.
this
Yes.
year he's a more developed player and one more year in college football as a starter. Those things did not get better. I think a lot of people who have these views probably didn't watch a lot of UCLA games. I did a lot for the show and partly because I hate watching Nico, by the way. I'm rooting for his failure. And it was very enjoyable for me to see him be bad. So I loved watching those games. And it was not better, Blake. It was not better. And again, keep in mind when you make these points that like, oh well, Nico would have got better. Again, Nico chose like he said. I mean, Hype really kicked him off the team. It really wasn't his choice, but he said him and his family said they left because of the Hype offense, the receivers, the offensive line, all of these things. Those things were in place last year. Those same things were in place last year. And the offense was way worse. I mean, dude, he would have had to take a massive jump to get to where Aguilar took the offense this year. Can we just be honest with that? Like, y'all do realize we hadn't put up 20 against Georgia in like Heupel's entire tenure before this year, right? Like that, like the massive jump that Aguilar took with this offense, like it just wasn't remotely close to where Nico was. So Nico would have had to take and again, we saw Nico play this year. It wasn't with us. It wasn't with Heupel's system, but we saw him play this year, and he was just atrocious. I mean, he was just not good. And again, I'll have some stats I'll give at some point, but I don't know. I feel like that's a big leap for me to say, oh, well, just because it would have been year two of Heupel's system, all of a sudden our offense would have been like better this year. I just don't see that at all, man. I don't think we have any evidence of that.
Yeah, because ultimately the things that Nico didn't do well, again, I don't think would have improved the offense as a whole. Would Nico have improved as a player? Potentially, marginally, right? Like, again, it's certainly possible, and it makes sense with consistency and all of that. Hendon progressed, all of that good stuff. But the question is, would our offense have improved in general with Nico in year two? And I just don't think he had the makeup to improve our offense, especially with
No.
Josh Heupel's system, which is a little bit of an indictment on Josh Heupel. You got to be able to recruit players who are going to be able to execute your system. But I digress. And ultimately, the point is, I think it's very clear. The numbers are there that the offense was vastly better this year than it was
Vastly.
last year. And Aguilar certainly elevated it more than even year two Nico would have elevated it.
And I agree with that. And Dylan's ultimate point is that Nico has a higher ceiling because of the tangible things, the athleticism, the size, the arm strength, and all of that's true, man. But there's so much more that goes into playing quarterback, and we see teams uh, kind of lose big by betting on guys like that have the arm strength, they have the athleticism. See DJ Lagway. Okay, DJ Lagway, it's not the Hypo system, and I know it's Billy Napier, but year 2 of DJ Lagway, second year in the Florida system, a guy who was a 5-star, who had as many tangibles as Nico has, right? I mean, he is as big, as strong, has the arm. He's not as fast, he's not as good as a runner, but he is a big, strong athlete, Blake. He got significantly worse this year. And again, it's not apples to apples, but the thing is, Dakota makes this point all the time. I shout him out. He's watching NFL Sunday right now. He's not listening to Vol Talk, but I'll shout out Dakota. He makes this point all the time. A lot of people make the mistake that young players always have this linear progression that goes up, up and up and up. That is not the case. That is not the case a lot of the time. It even happened with Lenore Sellers this year at South Carolina, like another example of a quarterback who's very much like Nico, who, by the way, I think is actually a better athlete than Nico, a better runner, and is more strong, has a better arm. But he didn't get better this year. It doesn't always work that way. They don't always, those big 5-star athletes, they don't always get better because there's so much more, to Blake's point, to playing quarterback.
Yeah, it's a position more than any other that requires those intangibles, and I unfortunately, yeah, I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but last year, Austin, I started even off camera, started rumbling. I was the biggest supporter of Nico, and then I started questioning. I was like, man, I don't know. I don't know if he
Yeah.
is making enough quick decisions, and I don't know about his body language. He's got his head down, walking down on the Vol walk.
Yeah.
So it's intangible stuff for sure. But Austin, I'd love to hear from you on some cold hard numbers.
Yeah.
So and you've got some nuanced stuff as well. Walk us through some numbers.
Yeah, I'm going to try to be as nuanced as possible with it. Maybe even compare Joey's year to Nico on Tennessee last year, because I think that's same system, mostly the same players. But yeah, just this is some PFF numbers. I like PFF. Some people don't. I do. I believe in their grades. They grade basically every player from every game, Blake, on an individual basis, and they try to isolate an individual player's play in a very team sport, which is tough sometimes. I know that's tough. But I think their quarterback numbers in particular are really good. So passing grade, that's just, basically grading each pass. Joey had a 90.7. That ranks 4th in college football, Blake. 90.7. And again, Joey wasn't perfect this year, but that's pretty good. That's pretty good for a PFF passing grade. Nico's passing grade this year with UCLA, Blake, 66.1. That ranks 79th in college football. So, I mean, we're not even talking about in the same world here. Joey's offensive
Even if
grade.
PFF is marginally off,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it can't be that off.
And again, we always have people in our chat reminding us how the SEC schedule is tougher than the Big Ten schedule. So add that context as well. It's a tougher schedule. So there you go. Joey's offensive grade. So this takes into account Nico's running ability, Blake. This takes all that into account. This is offensive grade as a whole is a 90.4 for Joey Aguilar. That ranks 6th in college football. For Nico, it's 73.9, ranked 62nd. Not much better. That includes the rushing. That's taking that into account. Big time throws for some of our newer listeners, which we might have some are we have higher view count today. So big time throws are basically just the best throws in football. A lot of them are deep downfield. A lot of them are in tight windows. It's just the toughest throws in football. Joey Aguilar had 20 to Nico's 8 on the season. Turnover worthy plays. That's simple. It's any play that PFF determines is the quarterback's fault that should have been a turnover, not just plays that result in turnovers, which actually helps the quarterback a lot. Because remember, like early in the year when Aguilar was throwing all these picks, right? And like, oh, he's still, a turnover machine. if you watch the games and if you add the context, which PFF does, it was our receivers literally dropping passes and deflecting into defenders' hands. It was some of the most unlucky turnover luck at the beginning of the year for Aguilar, and that was reflected in his turnover worthy play numbers. And Nico's always done a better job at not turning the ball over because he's always taking sacks. But Aguilar still, with more attempts, everything, was still had less turnover plays. He has 8 to Nico's 9. So if you kind of look at turnover plays and big time throws as like a TD to interception ratio, Blake, which I kind of like to do,
Yeah.
Aguilar's 20-8 versus Nico's 8-9. I mean, it's just, again, the numbers aren't close. It's again, like, even if you think Nico would have gotten 50% better, which, like, again, it's not always a guarantee. It's likely it's not going to happen. He still wouldn't have matched Aguilar this year, Blake. Another number I love, Blake, and this speaks to the point you've always made, which is such an astute point, which is pressure to sack. This is a number that I encourage people to look into because pressure to sack percentage is basically the percentage of pressures that the quarterback pressure, and y'all should know what that is. Basically, anytime a defender's close to the quarterback on a drop back, and the amount of times that results in a sack. Okay, so the percentage of those pressures that result in a sack, this is what I feel like Nico's really struggled at, holding on to the ball, not making decisions.
Yeah.
Joey's this year was 13.6, which, by the way, was even higher to start the year. He was actually on an elite pace to begin the year with that number, Blake, but it fell off towards the end, unfortunately. Nico's was 18.3. So, again, another stat where Joey is better. Another one. It really just goes on and on. And then the last thing I'll bring up as far as advanced stuff goes, Blake, which you loved this. I told you this before the show started. Drop percentage. This is the amount of passes that were dropped by the receivers. Okay. And I agree. I think Nico had Joey Aguilar had better talent. Obviously, Tennessee has more talent than UCLA. However, if we're talking about drop percentage, like who has the higher drop percentage, that means how many times did your receivers drop it? How many times did your receivers let you down? Joey's is almost double what Nico's is. 9.8% of Joey's passes were dropped this year from PFF, according to PFF. And Nico is at 5.4. So Joey actually had more drops on the season from his wide receivers, Blake, than Nico did.
And that, again, proof's in the pudding right there. Yes, we had more talent, vastly more talent, but we weren't going through a coaching debacle like UCLA was. All of this, which all of that speaks, Austin, to the just absolute BS that was Nico and his dad's excuses about why they were leaving. Yeah. Right? Oh, it's a better situation.
No question.
It's more money. Okay, well, you ended up with less money. You ended up with a worse situation. So obviously it was actually that you were trying to get more money. You got told no, and then you tried to play hardball and you got struck out.
Yeah.
And so, but I digress, right? Yeah. I mean, it's like Joey had his receivers letting him down, unfortunately, and a few that were one touchdown and pass in particular, Austin, some things
taken
were taken away by BS penalties.
Yep.
And so, yeah, man, it's just the numbers are there. The eye test is there. I mean, what else is there?
Blake, and I can point to 2 big passes that I know fans, these are 2 losses, right? One of the things, we would have been really taking victory laps if we made the playoffs this year, by the way, like some serious victory laps. But 2 big passes that were dropped this year from Aguilar that maybe cost us games, that Aguilar put on the money, okay? The 4th and 1 against Oklahoma, Blake, where the 4th-string tight end dropped the pass, and I said he should never play here again. I've probably come off that a little bit. Okay, I think he deserves another chance, but that was a huge one that could have led to the comeback against Oklahoma. And then Mike Matthews, and again another guy that I love. Mike Matthews has a super bright future, but we've talked about he had some critical drops this year. No way around it. In the Vanderbilt game, Blake, that drop he had in the comeback attempt, it hurt us in a bad way. And I'm not saying we would have went on to win the Vanderbilt game. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is didn't help us. didn't help us. It didn't help us
Yeah.
at all. And so, yeah, man. And those are just two passes in particular that, again, maybe we're big reasons that we're 8-4, that we have 2 more losses on the schedule. So, yeah, I think our opinions have been this all year. We've seen it all year. Now, I think without question, Joey was better this year. I don't think there's any doubt in that. But also, I think Joey would have been better this year with rather than Nico. I do.
Yeah, I do too. It's, it's just, I don't think there's any way to argue otherwise. Again, we can have a nuanced argument about, well, we can have any argument. If anyone wants to disagree,
Yeah,
go for it.
yeah, it's fine. Whatever.
But I do appreciate the nuanced argument that Dylan brought, which is, okay, oh, yeah, Joey's certainly upgraded us, but would Nico have at least excuse me, improved in year two? We can have all those nuanced conversations, but I'm gonna say it till I'm blue in the face, brother. That you can't argue the numbers, and the proof's
Yep.
right there in front of you. Joey wasn't an upgrade; he was an improvement. So thank God we got Joey.